Welcome to the Huddle Up Podcast, your go-to show for all things Broncos.
What is good, Broncos country? Welcome into the Huddle Up Podcast, presented by Mile High Huddle. It is time to drop some knowledge and have a little bit of fun while we're at it. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, Scout Media, CBS Sports Digital. With me is Will Keys, editor and writer at Mile High Huddle. Now, today's episode is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/huddle up. Over 180,000 different titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's audibletrial.com/huddle up. It's a service, it's a product that I use on a daily basis. And if you don't always have time to sit down and read the books that you want to read, Audible is perfect for that. I listen to it when I'm doing my commutes, when I'm working around the yard, if I'm cooking something up in the kitchen, passes the time, and I get another book under my belt. audibletrial.com/huddle up. Now, the show is here, Huddle Up, to give you a deep dive each week on your favorite team, the Denver Broncos. And we need your help. We can't grow without you. So take a second, rate the show on iTunes, or if you're on Android, rate the show on Stitcher. And if you have time, maybe take a second, leave a comment. These are two very important things that can help us tremendously. Make sure you are following the show. We changed our Twitter handle, @HuddleUpPod. That's @HuddleUpPod. And if you appreciate what we're doing here, retweet the episodes on Twitter, share them on Facebook. And I'm sure most of you are already subscribing to Huddle Up on iTunes. And if you're on Android, Stitcher. But if you're not, take care of that little bit of business. The show can also be found on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeart, CastBox, and YouTube. We're pretty much everywhere you need us to be in order to access the show, no matter what phone or operating system you happen to be using. OTAs are about to wrap up, and then we're going to get into mini camp, and then there will be a little bit of a break before training camp. And you're not going to want to miss a single episode. And now we welcome in our guest for today's show, Brandon Perna, the brainchild behind the sensation that Broncos country is absolutely crazy about, still is, been running for several years now. That's Good Broncos, That's Good Sports. Brandon, my friend, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chad. You were a big help in building That's Good Sports on the internets and interwebs.
No, I just jumped on the bandwagon, bro.
Yeah, well, you helped me. It's still not nearly as big as it needs to be, so it's not like you helped that much, but you helped a little.
For those who might not have been around at this time in Mile High Huddle's history, Brandon made videos for Mile High Huddle while he was still doing, of course, also doing, I should say, That's Good Broncos. And you made some really memorable killer videos. Some of the ones that I still get a lot of feedback from people, from readers and whatnot, is the Brandon Marshall. I think that might have actually been the first video you made for Mile High Huddle, was the Brandon Marshall video. That one, and the one where Julius Thomas and Ryan Clady did the cut block to Calais Campbell, and what's his name? Bruce Arians was all pissed off about it. You remember that?
Yeah. I don't really remember anything about the videos, but I remember those things happening.
It was funny as hell, and at the end you say there's like you flash like a let's be friends again, Bruce. And anyway, it's just funny. But
yeah, well, Bruce was being a real jerk.
He was.
I like Bruce Arians, and he was acting like a giant wiener boy because this guy got hit. He said it was the dirtiest play he's ever seen in football. I remember that now.
Yep, that's right. A little hyperbole.
Bruce Arians has been coaching since like the 1940s too, so I kind of doubt that's the dirtiest play that he's ever seen.
Yeah, he's like deceptively old. He doesn't look that or act that old.
No, he acts like he's cooler than I am.
Yeah, he's got the Kegel hat, so that's how you know he's cool.
Oh yeah. Did you guys ever watch All or Nothing the on Amazon Prime where they followed I think it was the 2015 Cardinals?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I saw every episode.
Did you ever check that out, Brandon?
I watched most of it. I don't know why I stopped. I started watching the Last Chance U at the same time.
That was great,
and I kind of liked that more. But then I didn't finish either one.
Dude, you didn't find out how the season ended for Eastern Mississippi Community College?
No,
That's a wild ending. If there's an ending you want to see, it's that one.
Yeah, it's
Is
worth it? Oh, yeah.
It goes way off the tracks.
Watching half of Fight Club and being like,
Exactly, dude.
And find out like the huge plot twist.
Yeah, it's like turning off Shutter Island with like 20 minutes left. Like, that wasn't that good.
That's right. No, it's definitely worth it. It's definitely worth it. But one thing we wanted to talk about, just a quick update for our listeners here. So for those who might have missed it, over the last week or so, second-year safety, Will Parks, has gotten himself into a little bit of hot water. And it all started with a little bit of a leak on Snapchat where he showed a couple of plays from OTAs that didn't cast Paxton Lynch in exactly the greatest light. And there was some outrage in the media. Some fans kind of tripped out about it. And Brandon, you kind of found yourself a little bit at the center of that story, I guess. And we wanted to talk about, first of all, your experience with that. Will Parks, I mean, he's kind of gotten some hot water and whatnot, but the coaching staff really seems to, from what Vance Joseph said on Monday anyway, not a big deal. No punishment necessarily coming down the pike for him in that matter, notwithstanding the domestic violence that we found out about as well that had happened in March but didn't break until Friday. What was your take on that whole thing?
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Somebody tweeted me the video that they pulled from Snapchat, and I asked them when, because I didn't know that it was new footage. So I asked the guy who tweeted it to me, I was like, when did this happen? And he was like, it was on Will Park's Snapchat. I retweeted it. And then I was like, oh crap, I don't want to get him in trouble. So I unretweeted my retweet, but it was too late. Like, it had already been seen. And, then an article gets written about it. And then the next day it blew up into this huge story where things get blown. Like, I didn't think it was that big a deal from what he was showing. Did Paxton Lynch look great on those two plays? No. But was I worried about that? No. Now the story is, Will just wanted to show kind of the progress he was making, but I don't know what he was doing on those plays either. That was that impressive.
Yeah. You couldn't really even see him, really. I tried to find him. I was like, I don't see him. Yeah.
I was trying to look for his number. So I don't think it's a big deal. The part of it that is a big deal is you're not supposed to, put out footage from closed practices or whatever. I heard Brandon Marshall talk about it today, and he said it wasn't a big deal and that he himself had tweeted or Snapchatted out footage from practice that he wasn't supposed to do before. But, nothing happened, and Vance Joseph said it wasn't a big deal. So I think it's one of those stories that, for whatever reason, it turned into people talking about whether or not Will Parks should be cut from the team.
Right.
Right. It's just the hottest of the hot takes that you can have on that. But then that night, Mike Klis reports about his arrest that happened in March, which was weird timing.
Was it the same night that the whole thing happened with Snapchat, that it broke?
Yeah, it was the same night.
Okay.
Mike Klis's tweet about it went out an hour after I posted my video. And so the domestic violence thing is also weird and probably not as big of a deal as it's being made out to be, because it was harassment and threats, which is serious, which is stupid.
But it's all still alleged.
Right. Yeah, it's alleged. There's a lot of information on the story it's
out there.
Can't be proved or not proved at this point. I don't know. But so I wanted to talk about that. So yeah, it was a weird thing. I've met Will Parks. I've shot an interview with him. He's a really nice guy, a cool guy. And it's, and I've talked to Vic Lombardi about this before. Before I had no, worries if I needed to rip on a player or make fun of them. But being in Denver for 2 years and working more and more
with the team as media, closer to the team, you're not remote from Los Angeles anymore. You're a lot more. What's a good word for it? A lot more credibility. You're closer to the source.
Yeah, and you get to kind of know some of the people. I'm not going to pretend I know all of them very well, but you start to, you don't want to throw anybody under the bus unless they really deserve it. And to me, Parks seemed like a guy who totally didn't deserve any of the heat he was taking until the Kliss thing came out about his arrest. Then it gets really kind of like a murky territory, and you got to be careful about what you say and how you say it, because
right.
you got to let the process play out. But I prefer not to be parts of those situations.
Yeah.
and I really wasn't. It just, the guy tweeted it to me. So it's not like I went to his Snapchat. And,
you're not like digging this up, monitoring
Right.
the situation, like trying to catch these guys with their drawers down.
Right.
Yeah.
And in a couple weeks, I'm going to go to the TJ Ward charity golf tournament. And as long as everything goes through, I'll be shooting video there. And Will Parks was there last year. And it's like, the last thing I want is to be like hanging around these guys and Will Parks being like, so why the hell did you post that thing about me?
You threw me under the bus, dog.
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see if he gives you the cold shoulder.
Like, ugh.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me put it this way. It's kind of a quick do you buy it? You know, there's been a lot made over the summer of, and really it kind of sources back to December with some of the back and forth between the offense and the defense in the locker room and the blow up between Aqib Talib and Russell Okung and all that. And there's kind of been this kind of sense of passive aggression between the offense and the defense. And there's even been some of that that's bled out. You know, we could, I don't want to make it sound too extreme. It is a little, or go too far down the path of hyperbole here, but there has been a little bit of passive aggression in the media amongst some defensive guys and some offensive guys during OTAs. Vance Joseph, he says, look, I don't think there was any intent there. I believe, Will, that he wasn't trying to make Paxton look bad or make the offense look bad. But it's kind of a quick, do you buy it? Do you believe him? Do you think it really was, Brandon, in your opinion? Do you think Will Parks' slip there was innocent, as to use Vance Joseph's words? He categorized it as being innocent. You know, sometimes when we're being innocent, quote, it can hurt us and others, etc. So what's your take on that? Or do you think he maybe it was a little bit of a Freudian slip, some stuff bleeding out from practice?
I don't know if it's bleeding out from practice maybe now necessarily, but if I would buy that Will Parks was completely innocent if, like I said, we saw something in those plays of him doing something, you know, really good. But the two plays he showed are just kind of weird plays for that to be the case. And maybe I don't know enough about football to really understand what he did well in those situations. But in terms of whether or not I believe there's some sort of divide in the locker room, I don't think it's strictly an offense versus defense thing. Mm-hmm. From some of the things I've heard, and I'm not going to get into it because I don't have like confirmed sources on it, but
right.
there were things that happened last year. I think both part of the football thing and part of the off-field stuff with different relationships with different people in the locker room that caused some definite friction in that locker room against kind of those two groups. But I don't right now, because I want to be positive about where this team's going forward, I would lean to believe that Will Parks wasn't trying to, you know, crap on Paxton Lynch on those plays, and that there is probably something there defensively that he was proud of.
Right.
Whether it was him or just the unit in what they were doing. Right.
Well, hopefully it blows over here quickly, and the Broncos and Will Parks, poor Will Parks in his second year, can get back to the business of playing football and really trying to make the team. He's a guy that's 1 year removed from being a 6th-round pick, so he's got to get out there on the grass and make this thing happen. But we have, Brandon, a few more topics for this week's Do You Buy It segment. And this is something where we tackle a common Denver Broncos narrative each week, kind of determine its merit. Will, why don't you start us off?
Yeah. So today, linebacker David Harris was cut pretty unceremoniously after practice today by the New York Jets after 10 years with the Jets. So do you buy that David Harris would be a worthwhile addition to the Broncos defense?
I don't know. I really don't know much about David Harris. I know they're supposed to cut Eric Decker tomorrow or tonight as well.
Cut or trade.
Yeah, 10 years. What is he an inside linebacker?
Yeah, he's an inside kind of off-ball linebacker like Brandon Marshall.
Based on that, like I would like to look at what he did last year. Well, if I were to make an educated decision on this, I would say I'd want to look at how he played over the last 2 years and check his health. If those two, if he performed at a high level and if he's been healthy, then I would say that it's worth looking at, because I think one of the positions that is kind of a question mark on the defense is, who's going to fill in next to Brandon Marshall. Can Brandon Marshall stay healthy this year? He had a lot of injuries, on and off last season.
Right.
So, and I think Todd Davis is probably going to be that guy. And we know Todd Davis is a great run-stopping linebacker, but he's not necessarily great in coverage. So if the guy from the Jets is a good coverage linebacker, then I would be even more interested. But I don't know, because I didn't pay much attention to his play last year. Who paid much attention to any of the Jets play last year?
Who does? Unless you're one of the poor put-upon fans of the Jets there in the New York area. But no, in his prime, think back to Rex Ryan's heyday with the Jets, those 2 years where they went back-to-back to the AFC Championship game and lost, of course. During that era, David Harris was one of the premier inside linebackers in the NFL. He's been making quite a bit of money with the New York Jets, but I don't know what was it, Will, 10 years now in the league? And
yeah, he was drafted in 2007, so he was like one of those Mangini guys.
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say that. He's really getting old. He would have to, in my book, he would have to take he'd have to come in on like a vet min type thing if the Broncos were going to look at him. But he is a freaking 2-down thumper. But we already have that kind of in Todd Davis. He's not going to step in, as you were saying there, Brandon, and start covering tight ends like David Bruton.
Yeah, it's like if I'm a defensive coordinator, I really don't even. I'd want one linebacker. And I would just want like 6 safeties on my team that can hit and cover. And I would rotate those guys in at that second, like inside linebacker spot, because the ball's thrown so much. You need as many guys back there who can cover as possible. But I will say with Marshawn Lynch playing with the Raiders, it might not hurt to have a couple guys who can, like you said, Chad, go in there and thump, because they may have to do that twice next season.
Yeah, I think the Jets drafted about 6 safeties in the draft in early May, so they might actually be taking your approach.
I'm less confident about my idea now that you said that the Jets are the team who did it.
Well, one more.
They're the model.
One more do you buy it for today. Von Miller, of course, skipped Monday's OTA session. The Broncos got back to work after the weekend. They're finishing off their Phase 3 OTA practices this week. But he skipped Monday's OTA session. Why? To attend Game 2 of the NBA Finals in the Bay Area. Now, on the surface, obviously not a huge deal, because, these OTAs, after all, these are voluntary. But this is a team that's been trying to kind of manage a leadership void for the last year, ever since Peyton retired. And that probably contributed to some of the issues in the locker room last year in 2016. And now, Von Miller, he's a locker room leader. DeMarcus Ware is gone. And Vance Joseph, when he was talked about it or asked about it on Monday, seemed unperturbed by Miller's absence. He said Miller talked to him about it on Friday right before they left. But Brandon, do you buy that? Obviously not a big deal, but is this more of a tip of the iceberg type issue, or is that reading too much into it?
Yeah, I'm not worried about it at all. There's, a handful of players on that team who, if they weren't there for 1 or 2 or 3 of the OTA practices, I wouldn't worry. And Von Miller is probably the first player that I would be the least worried about, especially when you consider like all of the things he did last offseason. He's been at the Broncos facility a lot more this offseason. I feel like he's been more involved in everything. So I'm not worried about it. There's a lot of guys on that defensive side of the ball that I wouldn't care if they weren't there. Von Miller, Chris Harris, Aqib Talib, TJ Ward, Darian Stewart, most of the no-fly zone. If they weren't there, I wouldn't worry about it.
No big deal.
I guess maybe I would be a little worried if Talib was somewhere. If he was in Dallas, it might be slight.
That'd be cause for concern.
I think that's a really good point about Von Miller. He wasn't really active in the offseason until about, I don't know, like July last year. But I think like my favorite part of last offseason was when Von Miller wasn't signed yet, and there's a little bit of tension between him and the Broncos. And the Raiders fans on like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram sort of gaslighting themselves into thinking that they would actually be able to sign Von Miller after he kind of spurred the Broncos. And so they'd have Khalil Mack on one side and then Von on the other side. And so now, he goes to game 2 of the finals, which is at Oracle Arena, which they literally like share a parking lot with the Oakland Coliseum.
Yeah.
And so now I'm waiting for the Raiders fans to sort of put 2 and 2 together and like the light bulb to go off in their head and think, well, Von was in Oakland on whatever, like Sunday night. And then he's absent from Denver OTAs on Monday morning.
Yeah.
Is he?
I don't know. Yeah.
Next.
Are they talking trades? Is he hanging out with Jack Del Rio? He was their defensive coordinator from 2013 to 2014, if you remember. So they might be talking to trade.
Well, and I mean, let's face it. I don't think Von Miller's ever going to be DeMarcus Ware. Like, everyone expects him because he was mentored by DeMarcus Ware to eventually like step in and be that teacher, that leader, that kind of rah guy. I don't ever see that happening, Brandon.
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be a different kind of leader than DeMarcus Ware. I know that I think he is a leader on that defense, and there are players that look up to him. But I think you're right. They're different people. They're different personalities, and how you lead is different for everyone. And those two guys, we were fortunate that DeMarcus Ware came in, I think, when he did, to help mentor Von Miller. And he turned into, one of the best defensive players in the NFL. But if you look back to those first 2 seasons with him, there were off-field issues, and then there was the torn ACL. So there was a lot of things kind of stacking up against him that if it went a different way, we wouldn't be, sitting here talking about him being a Super Bowl MVP.
Right.
And so it's like, can he be that guy for somebody else? Maybe later on in his career, but I think you're right. It's kind of a different personality, and it's hard to make that like tangible when you're comparing it to a guy like DeMarcus Ware.
Yeah, not everybody can be DeMarcus Ware. He's kind of a once in a generation type of leader, and you can't just expect people to just take over that role. So I think it's going to take a while, and maybe Aqib Talib or TJ Ward is the vocal leader for now, but I think in your 6th or 7th year, you don't quite grow into that role yet. So I think it's going to happen organically, and I think someone will assume that role eventually. Yeah,
it's like, there's no chance in hell that Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Swag Kelly, or any quarterback on the roster is going to be the leader Peyton Manning was.
Right.
And Peyton Manning was Peyton Manning from when he was in college. These guys are different quarterbacks, different personalities, and hopefully one of them can get to that point where they are a leader, but they'll never be the way he was. I don't think they can get people to, I don't know, there's just like that accountability with Peyton Manning in a locker room, and it commanded the entire team, not just the offense or defense. And finding players who transcend, kind of their side of the ball is they're rare. They're very rare.
Well, speaking of quarterbacks, let's check in on quarterback watch for the week. We had kind of a moment on Monday when the Broncos got back to business. Paxton Lynch had what many who were on site to report described as his best day as a Bronco. And, I remind people he has won a football game in the NFL. But nevertheless, a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz out of Dove Valley on Monday. He had a great day of practice. And it kind of was, conversely, Brandon, it kind of came on a day where Trevor Siemian didn't have the greatest day himself, so the contrast there made Paxton look even better. But what's your take on that? I made a video yesterday and a little piece just talking about, pump the brakes a little bit. Let's give this kid an opportunity to prove this throughout the rest of the summer and into training camp. Let's not quite anoint him just yet, but what's your take on what transpired on Monday?
Right. I think you said, like, let's wait and see when he plays in a preseason game, right?
Right.
Yeah. That's where I stand. Like, I could go out there and have a good day at quarterback right now. If
Definitely.
we're being honest. My arm is, well, I'm 32 now. I was throwing the football today, actually, and it takes a good 20 minutes before it doesn't hurt when I throw it. But once it gets warmed up, I could go out there and have a decent day when people aren't hitting me and we're not in pads.
Yeah.
So
32 is when quarterbacks hit their prime.
That's
allegedly,
prime
so.
QB territory.
Mentally, I'm ready.
You should be there. Yeah.
I know what the defense is going to do before they do it at this point. But I think it's good that people are excited that Paxton Lynch is showing an improvement. Both Lynch and Simeon should look better in practice at this point than they did last year. Those things to me are kind of given. Both of them should be able to make good throws in simulated situations like they're doing. So I'm not going to read anything into it until I watch both of them play in the preseason, because that's when we're going to get our first gauge of where they're at. I will say I think Mike McCoy is a much better fit for either one of those guys, because I think looking back, we know now that a big part of the problem was that the offensive system didn't have the personnel to run it the way Kubiak wanted. And with a young quarterback, when you have not much of a running game, bad offensive line, like, I don't care which young quarterback was running the offense last year, and I'm talking anywhere in the NFL, like nobody's going to have a lot of success there. So hopefully with a new offensive coordinator who's willing to gear the offense towards either one of those quarterback strengths, I'm excited about that. I don't care which one wins out the job. Yes, I like Simeon. I'm rooting for him because he's kind of an underdog. And I saw some things from him last year that I liked. Yeah. But we got to watch him play. It's a new season. So I don't know. To me right now, they're still the same.
Yeah, I think we were talking earlier about how, like, the two throws on Will Park's Snapchat spawned a billion hot takes on Twitter. Right. And I think we kind of have to apply the same logic to yesterday. It's more than a couple throws on some grainy Snapchat footage. Right. But at the same time, it's just a day's worth of practice. And so I think we should wait, because Paxton Lynch, since he's joined the Broncos, has been a pretty consistently inconsistent player. Like
consistently inconsistent. I like it.
Yeah, he had great training camp practices last year, and it just kind of depended, like, which way the wind was blowing, how he was going to do on any particular day. And he had good performances. He played well against Tampa Bay, and then kind of stunk it up against Atlanta and then Jacksonville later in the season. So I think we should wait it out and wait until mini camp and see if he can string together a couple of good performances in a row until we make any definitive judgments on Paxton Lynch.
And I do question, to your point too, Brandon, like, is there a quarterback left in the NFL who is a fit for Gary Kubiak's system? Like, is that – I have to question at this point whether or not the West Coast offense and the whole zone system that Gary Kubiak favors, whether or not that's even something that has any life left, any legs left in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think, from what I've heard is, teams, they utilize that, and Kyle Shanahan did last year, and he had a lot of success, but he was much more open to evolving it. You know what I mean? And I think the whole key to that specific system working is your offensive line has to be good.
Yeah, that's true.
And the Broncos didn't have that. And it felt like the line would be getting their ass kicked, and they would wait way too long to give guys help who needed help. It was just like, no, that's your job. Go out there and do it. And it wasn't working. So I question that too. I think it can work if you're flexible in how you do it. I think he had sex. Yes. He had sex with it he had so much sex with that system in Baltimore with Joe Flacco.
So much.
His eliteness.
But they didn't make it to completion. That's right. They lost in the playoffs to the
playoff
Patriots.
interruptus.
Right.
I believe that's the Latin term for it, yeah. We did see it with Joe Flacco, and that was only 2014. So it's not this archaic philosophy that's it can't take root anymore in the NFL just because it's such a vastly different game. But I think you do have to have a pretty competent offensive line, a good cut zone blocking offense, and then some competent downfield threats to open up the running game a little bit.
Yeah, and I think also we kind of forget they changed the rules a little bit in how offensive linemen could block.
They did, yeah. Before
last season, right? That's when they made the switch about the.
Was it not a cut block? Was it cut block they changed? I think, or oh man,
I think maybe they expanded the definition for something.
Yeah, they
did
made
hurt zone guys though for sure.
So there was that, and what I look back to too is when we were doing the podcast on here a long time ago, and we were talking about Kubiak and Peyton Manning being able to, coexist together.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure I said something like, it would be stupid if they couldn't, right? Like, you take the best of what Kubiak does, you take the best of what Peyton Manning does, and you kind of merge them together to make an offense that works.
Yeah.
I thought that could happen, and I was terribly wrong.
Yeah.
They won the Super Bowl, but
against all freaking odds, they managed it.
Yeah. I just think there's a lot of, I don't know, when you get to that level, there's egos involved, and you've done things a certain way your whole career, and those are two guys kind of at the end of it.
Yep.
And I think I was ignorant in thinking that it would be like a harmonious fit.
Well, yeah, I mean, you would think at that point, two guys that accomplished could make it work, but I think a lot of that, too, just had to do with Peyton's age and the dropbacks and reading, all of a sudden being asked to read a defense from under center, and it was just
a lot of
the timing of that ask of Peyton Manning to turn the ship around like that at that point in his career in his 18th year was just a little much probably. But we're running a little bit short on time, Brandon. We want to ask you a couple of kind of rapid fire questions, including one or two from some listeners here. Just rapid fire. We talked a little bit, Eric Decker, it sounds like he's on the outs in New York. This came from a listener, and I'm sorry I didn't capture your Twitter handle. My apologies, listener. But the question was, do we want to bring Eric Decker back to Denver? Your thoughts, Brandon?
For my nickname purposes, yes. Do I think the Broncos need him in the receiving group? No, because their biggest need is kind of the slot position they need to fill. I will say the one thing I think the Broncos missed about Eric Decker the most when he left, two things, is he's a great red zone receiver, and he is a great blocking wide receiver.
That's true.
So
that's true.
Yep.
If you're a good blocking wide receiver, that never hurts to have. But I think the Broncos kind of have some depth at that position.
Yeah, and I think we can only have one white wide receiver wearing number 87 at any given point in time.
That is true.
That's true. Yeah.
Jordan Taylor fills that quota pretty well, so I don't know if we have room for Eric Decker at this point at least. So Braden, you spent a lot of last offseason hanging around at the facility and during training camp. So what's your most memorable or best interaction with a player at Dove Valley so far?
Oh, at Dove Valley was that was with Britton Colquitt and Brandon McManus. They would give me like stuff I could use every day, just like doing funny stuff and posing for the camera and acknowledging that I was a person. That
yeah,
went a long way for me.
Right on.
Yeah, the kickers are always kind of like the fringe guys on the roster, not necessarily like on like making the team, but they're always kind of the weirdos. They're like relief pitchers in baseball where they kind of just keep to themselves. So I think that's the best way to get in.
Sorry, they have all this time to kind of just like mess around because they don't have to do all the drills that everybody else does. So it's like they're just out there kind of having fun throwing. I mean, one day they were just trying to punt the football up to this tower that they have at Dove Valley, and they were trying to see who the first guy was that could hit it. And then they cut Britton Colquitt, and I was pretty bitter about that.
What about Riley Dixon, though?
I like Riley Dixon.
Yeah.
I thought he performed really well last season, and he's obviously more athletic than Britton. But
he set the record for net punting average as a rookie too, all time.
Yeah. If he starts giving me making some funny faces and flexing for me, then I will forget about Britton Copeland.
Here's
a great fake punter too. Good arm.
Here's kind of like a big picture question, Brandon. I'm sure many of our listeners, those who are of course familiar with your work, would be interested to know your answer to this. But if you could just, genie in a bottle, you get 3 wishes. What is your dream job?
Oh, my dream job?
Your dream job.
That is basically I want to be the John Oliver for football. I want to do my show once a week because trying to keep up with the football news cycle is a grind.
Especially in season.
Yeah. Right now is nice. I'm about to go on cruise control for the next few weeks. But I just want to make really good jokes about football, and the only way to do that well is you need to have time to write. And during the season, I feel like now I've tried to do so much that a lot of verse because I'm just trying to get them up as,
right.
that day or whatever.
You're trying to keep pace with the news.
Yeah. And when I have a day or two to kind of really work on writing something, and then the next day I can shoot it and edit it, I feel better about it. So my show on a bigger platform with a little bit of help from some talented writers, because God knows that it is hard to try to write new good jokes frequently. Some days you do well, and some days you're just like, what did I just make? Why am I even posting this? But you have this fear if you don't post it, people are going to go away and never come back and watch.
It's like a compulsion that you feel like you have to be there for the listener. You got to be there for the reader. In your case, you got to be there for the viewer.
Exactly. And this last season, when the Broncos started playing worse, people really stopped caring.
Yep.
So it was I really had to focus on trying to stay on top of, relevant NFL news to make up for people losing interest in the Broncos.
And it was just a weird year in content for content creators that cover the NFL. You had the election cycle, you had the Colin Kaepernick stuff. No one really knows for sure exactly all the factors that went into the NFL. I mean, the ratings went down. As a publisher of a major Denver Broncos website, we experienced that where at a certain point in that season, and maybe you're right, Brandon, maybe it was when things started going sideways for the team, but actually I saw a little bit of that even before the Broncos really went off the rails. It was a weird year.
It was weird. I think the Peyton Manning exodus also played a big part in it, because I think there are a lot of people paying attention to the Broncos just because he was there, and he was gone. It's why do they care now? You know what I mean? So many people like to follow players now, I feel, just as much as people like to follow their team.
Yep.
So
yeah, it was like the Florida transplants when they drafted Tim Tebow, and then they got the same Indianapolis Colts transplants when they signed Peyton Manning in 2012.
Exactly.
And yeah, Brandon, to your point, you want to be kind of like the John Oliver of the NFL. Maybe you could take over Bill Simmons' slot on HBO, because I did hear that's open. Apparently,
that's a show I would watch, Brandon.
Absolutely.
It could be good if they would just give me a GD chance to do it.
Maybe you need to get an agent. Maybe there's some kind of sports anchor writer type of agent you could hire and get your reels up there for these guys.
No, honestly, that's what you need to do, but I don't think I've done anything good enough to justify even trying to do that.
No,
and
dude, your comedy is quality though, because you cover the NFL, you cover the Broncos, and you're funny, dude. I know what you mean about jokes where you sometimes you're trying to dig, and that's the same for anyone who's trying to create any form of original content where you're just digging and digging, trying to find something that sticks, dude. But I think most of our listeners right now who are familiar with That's Good Broncos would say that the content you provide is unique, it's funny. There's times I learned something watching the show. I think most of us can agree that you have a very special talent, my friend, and I think one day you keep knocking on that door, you keep pounding that rock, you're going to get some blood out of it.
No, I appreciate that, and I hope you're right, because I feel like either that's going to happen or one day I'm just going to get shut down completely.
Well, here's one more. We'll move this along. So we're just 2 more questions, then we'll get out of here. But we had a question from a listener at Mile High Maniac on Twitter. He wants to know who your BDP of Broncos OTAs is, your big dong player of Broncos OTAs this time around.
To make it friendly for your show, I thought it would be cool if we call it the Big Richard Player Award.
Perfect.
I like it. I should have gone with that. I should have checked with you before asking the question. Well done.
No, because I went with Dong before as well, but then today I was like, what? Probably Richard is funnier than any of them.
Definitely.
The Big Richard Player of OTAs?
That's right. Yep, that's the question.
Well, that is a good question.
I think Will Parks.
that was the direction I'm leaning. Either Will Parks or when Derek Wolfe started swearing up on the podium.
Yeah, and he also got a little confrontational with DMAC on Monday. It was kind of funny.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he was asking him if he's looking forward to something like that, to fighting Garrett Bowles in training camp this year, and Wolfe kind of snapped. And why do you guys keep asking that? Why do you want to see me fight some young kid? And DMAC goes, well, we would be entertained. And Wolfe says, I'm not here for your entertainment. And it was
Actually,
all like in good
exactly
fun. But
why all football players are there.
exactly.
Yeah.
But he was speaking specifically to the media.
Right.
He goes, I'm here
that's
for the
funny.
fans.
Derek Wolfe is a guy who I would he's extremely intimidating to me.
Yeah, he's not the one to go after if you're DMAC. I don't know if I would poke the bear in that situation. But something tells me that's not the first time DMAC's got a player riled up before.
That's his game.
Yeah, definitely.
But today, to make a better answer for that question, Brandon Marshall was on Vic Lombardi's show today, and he was talking about guys he's excited about, and he mentioned Will Parks and Justin Simmons.
Nice.
Coming into their second year, but he's saying, they look good, and I think the defense is excited about what those two guys can do, and we got a little taste of it last year. They didn't play a ton, but I would keep my eye on both of those players.
Now, last thing for you here and we'll get out of here, is anything coming up for That's Good Sports or That's Good Broncos heading into camp? You mentioned you're going to be attending that TJ Ward golf tournament, etc. Anything for our listeners they need to keep an eye on heading into camp and the season?
That would be one, and fingers crossed, because it's not a for sure deal yet, but there is a decent chance I will be at Terrell Davis's Hall of Fame induction.
Nice.
Wow.
So I don't want to curse myself.
Here, I'll knock on wood.
But if I get to go to that, that will be a very cool episode.
Absolutely. Well,
because I'm going to point out to Terrell Davis that I beat him in the media.
That's right. In the Mile High Report media bracket. That's right.
And if he wants to trade his jacket for my trophy, I am open to.
Did you get a trophy for that?
Yeah, they sent me a very big one.
How tall is that trophy?
It's like 5 feet tall.
Nice.
I had to assemble it myself, which took a couple hours. It was literally in, I think, about 100 pieces.
It's like going to IKEA.
Yeah.
Well, hey.
Except like the screws weren't as hard to turn as they are with your IKEA stuff.
But that shows you how much Broncos country appreciates what you do, and we appreciate you, Brandon, joining us for today. Big thanks, man, for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I just want both of you guys to know from the bottom of my heart that I love you so much.
That means a lot.
We love you too.
I think that's how interviews on podcasts or TV should all end now, because so many people are fighting. We just all need to say how much we love each other, and
absolutely,
the world would be such a better place.
Absolutely.
Well, we love you too, Brandon.
We love you, bro.
Thanks for coming on.
He's on Twitter at Brandon Perna. He's on YouTube, of course. That's Good Sports. That's Good Broncos. Follow the show on Twitter at Huddle Up Pod. Find Will in the Twitterverse at WillKey6, myself at Chad N. Jensen, and at Mile High Huddle. Again, tweet us your questions. We'll try to address your concerns on the show as often as we can. And don't forget to subscribe, y'all. For Will, for Brandon, I'm Chad. We'll talk to you soon.
I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm here for your facts.
Mile High Huddle.